The Second Coming of Gluttony, or sometimes translated as the Second Coming of Avarice, intricately weaves together themes of addiction, regret, redemption, and the relentless pursuit of self improvement within a captivating fantasy narrative. With the backdrop of intense fantasy elements and the incorporation of the seven sins motif, this novel stands out as a compelling exploration of human nature and the quest for personal growth. Through meticulous world building and nuanced character development, the author crafts a narrative that resonates deeply with readers, inviting them into a world where reality and fantasy converge in profound ways. The novel displays qualities of traditional novel length formats. The author has mapped out in advance the backstory and the critical plot elements, and it shows. The small details in early chapters hint to a greater world, and yes, that greater world exists, and it remains consistent. One simple example is the main character's main ability, the power to scan items and characters, then see them in different colors representing a certain characteristic. The ability shows the color green for non hostile and red for deadly threat, and so on. However, the author has wisely left this ability as partially locked, so this colored version doesn't work on the most plot centric characters or items. They don't have colors. However, you know the author is working hard behind the scenes because eventually, with his ability, everything will have a color. Therefore, when something doesn't have a color, the readers will know why. Better still, the flawed main character doesn't just passively accept this ability, he makes judgment on why something would be non-colored. He is curious how his ability works and realizes that a lack of information in his ability is still information and responds accordingly. Character development. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Second Coming of Gluttony is its ability to blend real life issues with fantastical elements, offering readers a story that is both captivating and deeply relatable. The protagonist undergoes significant character development throughout the narrative, transforming from a flawed and troubled individual into a beacon of hope and redemption. His journey is marked by moments of introspection, growth, and ultimately self discovery, making him a compelling and empathetic character. Furthermore, the novel explores the protagonist's strained familial relationships, adding layers of complexity to his journey and highlighting the universal themes of love, loss, and reconciliation. Originally, he is a gambling addict who has completely ruined his life. However, he gets a wake up call from his future self and tries to fix his life step by step while bearing all the consequences of his past. Each step along the way, the reader is with him, and we see his desires, his fears, his regrets, and his thoughts. If you cannot stand the protagonist, then you will hate this novel. The protagonist finds new hope in a completely new world, despite all the strings attached. Here, in this world, he can completely dedicate himself to a new cause so he can forget the sheer guilt and shame of his past. He throws himself headfirst into extreme danger and comes out a winner each time. He is capable of being ludicrously focused and determined, deathly serious and tenacious when it comes to survival, and can also possess commanding determination when speaking with others in the alternative world. When not serious, he is a prankster and consistently trolls others, girls specifically. The strangeness comes when we get into his character quirks, which in turn ties into the harem. When the protagonist is dealing with his numerous female friends, he will have frequent bouts of outright bizarre and childish behavior. While usually played for laughs, these moments clash so dissonantly with his normal personality that it becomes referenced by the characters in the plot directly. To the author's credit, they legitimately make a serious attempt to explain why he exhibits such dense and outlandish behavior with girls. The harem. The harem is mainly explored in the side stories, and the harem within the main story is executed fairly well, if I'm being honest. The girls are all recognizable and possess unique voices. Some are also adequately represented visually. They all have functions in the story and don't just fade away. There is no commitment to romance or adult material until the very, very end, and it's mostly up to the side stories to expand upon how the harem actually becomes a true harem. While the characters within the harem are distinct and contribute meaningfully to the plot, the execution at times feels contrived, leading to moments of discomfort. Nevertheless, the author's conscientious efforts to address this dissonance are evident, though not entirely flawless. The world building. The world building in the novel Second Coming of Gluttony is exemplary, showcasing the author's meticulous planning and attention to detail. From the early chapters, subtle hints and foreshadowing lay the groundwork for a richly developed world that unfolds with each turn of the page. The narrative of the Second Coming of Gluttony delves into political intrigue, exploring the dynamics between various factions in both the fantasy realm and the real world, namely Earth. Dying in the other world basically does not affect the Earth version of the character. If the character dies in paradise, as in the other world, they just forget the memories of their lives they had spent in the alternative world, and they return to their daily lives on Earth. They can also revive in the alternative world, namely paradise, but there are some requisite requirements. There is also an apparent political backstory in the novel, and it's quite the dark one. It explores the darkness hidden within the human mentality in quite an in depth manner. The human kingdom the protagonist is residing in is flanked by some kind of alien menace and a coalition of demi human nations. This is largely carved out a little at a time as it's being set up, and it's self apparent that the average earthling is neither particularly interested or informed about the geopolitics of the alternate world. But as the story goes on, it eventually becomes evident that the inability of the native humans of the alternate world to unite the earthling is what leads to their doom. So it becomes necessary for the protagonist to be the factor that causes a lasting political union between earthlings and the primary native human factions of the alternate world. The author makes a point that the core reason behind why humanity falls in the past timeline is due to the different political factions and nationalities and nations of earthlings who, in the end, could not unite against their common enemies. Because earthlings can freely travel between Earth and the alternative world, they maintain factions that exist on Earth. So, literally, the mafia is competing against the triad in the alternative world. Although it's unclear exactly what benefits the travelers get from the alternative world, the top powers are very wealthy on both sides. Yes, there are hints here and there that the Earthlings can take some amount of resources from this alternative world to their own world. Despite being a Korean novel, people from across the world are featured as travelers to these alternate worlds, and thankfully, there's no trace of apparent racial bias in the setting, although it's established early on that for some reasons unknown to the protagonist at the time, Korea, China, and Germany are special regions allowed national representation instead of continental representation and should thusly make an outsized percentage of the Earthling population. Indeed, the most powerful faction is some made up Korean corporation. Of course, this is convenient for the author's purposes of having Korean characters, but the author again establishes the necessary backstory. It isn't set in stone that Korea is powerful. It's just that the most powerful Earthling is a Korean. And by his merits, he essentially single handedly made them the most powerful faction. The author makes this an interesting political crisis because he's disappeared at the start of the novel and they're experiencing a crisis because of the power vacuum created from their top agent being missing in action. And this directly affects the protagonist as he was recruited by one of their agents. So, to some extent, they regard him as their own and regard him as a very promising rookie. It has to be mentioned that these various corporations originating in Earth treat the Earthlings as modern day slaves, with contracts with ridiculous slave like regulations. As a side effect of factions being able to freely travel back and forth, this also means that powers on Earth directly translate into power in the New World and vice versa. And the novel has broadly hinted that developing nations are mostly unimportant because of this, as there is not a single character in the territorial round from South America, Africa, or Oceania. Accordingly, we can presume that the factions from these Earth regions are very weak relatively to the factions from other regions. Again, this isn't meaningless backstory as political fighting from factions from Earth are again the core reasons humanity fails in this alternate world. This factor adds richness and depth to the overarching storyline, with the protagonist's action serving as a catalyst for significant geopolitical shifts. The author adeptly integrates real world elements into the fantasy setting, creating a compelling backdrop for the unfolding events. Furthermore, the exploration of factional rivalries and alliances adds a layer of complexity to the narrative, keeping readers engaged and invested in the outcome. In conclusion, The Second Coming of Gluttony offers a compelling blend of fantasy, drama, and introspection, making it a worthy addition to the genre. While some aspects may falter, particularly in the handling of certain character dynamics, the novel's strength far outweighs its weaknesses. Fans of immersive storytelling and nuanced character development will find much to appreciate in this engrossing tale of redemption and self discovery. That's all for this review. If you like this review, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and comment if you have your own opinions. Thank you.